are literally shaping the planet.
Purpose is the only pathway to a regenerative future.
We have a choice to stay with the status quo or to change.
What is the point of trying to be just resilient when we can actually innovate?
Thanks, everyone. And being a retailer and looking at the different issues we have around sustainability, I thought it would be great to go back and kind of talk about why we do what we do, how we do what we do, and how's it blended into our culture. And so I figured I'd go back to some of the early days that we had that kind of built the foundation of why we do some of the things we do. And to do so, I'll bring you into a couple of slides. And first thing to look at is the amount of touch points that you have inside of sustainability when you're a retailer. Now, there's thousands. So you think of all the products that we have, we typically inside of a store will have 35,000 items, 35,000 SKUs, but online we have close to 2 million. So what used to be a fairly simple model with boundaries that we understood is now a very, very broad model and touches all different aspects of any type of environmental issue that faces the world through production, manufacturing, shipping, and use. So if you look at what's on the screen, carbon emissions, indoor air quality, GMOs, invasive plants. It's interesting, but I had a call a couple of years ago from the North Carolina Department of Natural Resources, and they asked me to come meet with them in Asheville, and I did. And they were saying, you have invasive plants. And we go, well, we really don't, because we spend a lot of time working with the local state agencies to make sure we don't carry those in the store. And they said, what about Bradford pear? And I said, I didn't think a Bradford pear was listed as an invasive species. And so they took me to a place in the Parkway in the middle of nowhere where somewhere over the past probably 20 years, a lot of birds had tremendous amount of droppings, and there was a big Bradford pear invasive forest growing inside that no one had planted. So we have to be very careful about what we sell and how we sell it, and we have to look at all the different issues. Now, we look at sustainability and responsibility basically in three groups: people, products, and operations. And if you look at the people, it's our associates, things that we do for them, things that we offer to make them better, easier to do their job, more productive at their job. But then probably in a bigger picture when it comes to responsibility and sustainability is developing countries. And we have a lot of suppliers that have factories, manufacturing facilities in developing countries. And we spend a tremendous amount of time in those countries going through the factories. Each factory that we use, that's a private brand factory, has to go through audits either every 6 months to 2 years, depending on their grade. And it's a 2-day, 120 question audit that they go through inside the factory. And if you look at operations, a lot of things that we look at our stores, making our stores better. We've gone from using about 26 kilowatts per square foot in energy use in our average store down to around 15 kilowatts per square foot. So from 26 to 15, tremendous savings in energy and in dollars by having better ran stores. And also in our operations is supply chain distribution. And we watch that, we monitor the emissions from that on an annual basis to make sure that we're doing continual improvement. And the third, which is the biggest concern that almost everyone has, and our biggest environmental impact, is products that we sell. Now, we're a $120 billion company. We sell a lot of products, a lot of different industries. So we have to know what those are. And if you have an issue with Home Depot and you've got a problem with or a concern with some of the products that we may be carrying, there's many ways to get in touch with us. And you can go belly to belly with the apron in store. You can send us customer response. You can send emails to the district managers, or in some cases, you can go to an extreme, which takes us back to the beginning of what we do in sustainability and why we do it. In 1998, 1999, we had about 600 protests in 18 months. And the protests were around old growth, maintaining the world's forest, making sure that we don't cut down old growth trees around the world and destroy the forest. And like most retailers, we had third-party groups that we kind of leaned on. to say, you guys go talk to the environmentalists, tell us what's going on. But that kind of permeated over an 18-month period to where it led to this, which is a sign that was hanging right off 285 in Paces Ferry. For those of you familiar with Atlanta, a major thoroughfare. So when the sun came up on a cold October morning, this was hanging from the rack from the cranes, and traffic pretty much stopped on 285. So we took it serious from that point on. And so what we did was we said, there's a couple opportunities for us to things that we can do. We can either say, there's always going to be groups that are upset about products. Just take this with a grain of salt and move on. We could say, we don't cut the wood. It's the industry. It's Georgia Pacific. It's Weyerhaeuser. It's Canfor. Let them explain to the NGOs what they're doing. Or we can say, nope, we're taking off the gloves. We're going to handle this ourselves, which is what we did. So we eliminated our consultants that we had working on this. We brought it inside and we said, what is the best way to find this answer? And so we called all the NGOs, Greenpeace, Forest Action Network, Forest Ethics, NRDC, had them come into Atlanta. And for 2 days, we just sat down and said, tell us everything that's concerning you, and let's make sure that we handle it. And at the end of 2 days, we pretty much had a game plan that said, give us 2 years to find out where wood comes from, what are the issues in the countries that we're buying from, and what we need to do to make it better. And in return, we would like for you guys to stop all the protests. So on that day, they did, and we started to work. And we said, okay, we've got 2 years to understand what our impact is. So if you look around the store, this is a picture of the lumber aisle. In this aisle, we have about 63 items, 63 SKUs. And we have a couple of aisles like this in the store. So you've got 150 SKUs, items in these 2 aisles. Then when you bring in flooring, doors, windows, tool handles, up to 500, 1,000 SKUs. And as we started compiling this, I said, I think there's a lot of things we're missing. So we went to Atlanta, New York, Chicago, LA, and Dallas. And we said, we're going to go 4 feet by 4 feet through every store and just see everything that we have that contains wood and write it down. So it went from 1,000 items to 2,000 items to 3,000 items to 7,000 items. We ended up with over 9,000 items. And we said, wow, this is a lot of product. It's a lot of vendors. It's going to take us a long time to figure this out. And we're probably 3 months into the project at this time. This clock's ticking. We've got to figure out what to do. So as we went through, we had looked at the items and said, it's pretty simple. What's wood is wood and what's not is not. But what we found, if you look at a ceiling fan, a lot of ceiling fans have a little hanging chain with a knob on the end. We're walking through an aisle in Dallas. I looked at one of those. I said, has anyone accounted for this little piece of wood on the ceiling fan? And the answer was no. So we said, okay, track down this supply chain. You wouldn't think that the ceiling fan vendor would be under your wood supply chain, but it was. Then we looked at, products like barbecue grills, and we found barbecue grills where inside of the metal was wood. So it took a lot more time to analyze the SKU list than we thought. But as we started going through this, we said, all right, there's 2 parallel paths. One is to find out everything that has wood in it. And the second is to find out what's happening inside of all the world's forest. So if you look at all the countries and all the continents, we were buying wood from all those. And we said, we need to know what's happening in every single country. So as we did, we started getting, really good information from the industry who wanted to prove they were doing the right thing, from countries who were glad that, a retailer was taking interest in what's happening inside of their country and could help them make it better. But then also from the environmental groups and the NGOs saying, let us show you what we find. And it worked great for us as a retailer because we were able to spend, 1 day with the environmental groups, learning everything they knew and what they knew or perceived was going on. And then the next day, spend it with our suppliers, which are the big lumber suppliers, and compare the 2 notes. And on the third day, we would get the 2 groups together and say, let's go walk this forest and see what's really going on. Sometimes we found out that the industry was not aware of some of the practices that were considered to be devastating. And sometimes we found out that the NGOs thought things were happening that might not be happening. But we continued down the process. And when you clear, we major in forestry, we weren't certified forest, but we look at a picture like this and we know that this is probably not sustainable forestry. And when you go into Texas or Pennsylvania or Alabama and you clear 5 to 10 acres, you may displace squirrels, rabbits, a few deer. They're going to run over to the next forested land beside it. But when you start doing huge clear cuts like this, and when you start cutting into primate habitats and things like that, that is a whole different level of accountability and responsibility that if it's in your supply chain, you better know what it is and you better know what the impacts are. So as we started pulling this information together, we found that there were some parts of the world that, like Ecuador, Malaysia, certain parts of Indonesia, where the forestry was disappearing at a fairly large pace, some of them at 0.75% or 1% a year. In 50 years, you could lose 50% of your forest. So we started moving purchases around inside of this 2 years before we finished, saying, hey, we're not comfortable with what we're finding here. Let's move out and move to another area. So it was good for us to know this. And working with the NGOs and industry, all of a sudden we knew probably more than anyone else inside the industry. So as we did, at the end of the 2 years, we went out to San Francisco, sit down with the NRDC and the NRDC headquarters and every other environmental group that had been there 2 years prior. And we said, let's discuss this. Let's discuss what we found. So it was great. I handed out a book to everyone at the table and said, we're going to look at this book for about 8 hours, and then I'm going to take it up and write down what you can. But we handed them a book by country. So if we were wondering what we're buying in Brazil, we could hand them turn to the page in Brazil, show you by department. Is it fencing? Is it lumber? Is it flooring? How much are we buying on a cube, a metric cube? And what does that equal up to per year? And is it growing or diminishing? And it was great for us to sit around the table and listen to them talk about things that they were concerned about. And as they looked at where the wood was coming from, they were convinced, and we didn't know for sure, but they were convinced that most of our wood was coming from the rainforest. Well, lo and behold, 90 plus, 94, 95%, depending on the year, is coming from North America. And we said, okay, what are the North American forests? Are they sustainable? Are they non-sustainable? And as we started to find that information out as well, we're finding that the North American forests were growing at one of the fastest paces in the world. So you weren't losing forest land every year, you're gaining forest land every year, and 94% of your purchases are coming from there. So we said, okay, we feel pretty good about this part as far as having sustainability built into our supply chain on wood. And we looked around, as I said, we moved some purchases out of South America, we moved some purchases out of Southeast Asia into areas that we found to be more sustainable. And as you look today, and we get this information from the FAO, it's a Food and Agriculture Organization arm of UNAD and United Nations Aid Group. And they release this information every 5 years. So as soon as we get the information from 2020, we'll update this screen. But if you look, Asia's forest increasing, North American forests are increasing, Europe, Oceania. The two decreases are coming from Africa and South America. So 2 years ago, Home Depot adopted a policy saying that in the basins, the Amazon basins, because if you're buying wood from a plantation in certain parts of these countries, that's fine. You're not destroying the world's forest. But in the Amazon and the Congo basin, you could easily be, and a lot of people are every day. So you cannot ship anything to Home Depot out of the Amazon or out of the Congo basin forest unless it's FSC certified. And today, we're not getting anything out of there that's FSC certified. So we feel pretty good about our part of protecting the forest that need to be protected. But if you look at this information, what we found was at the end of the day, we knew probably more than anyone else. And so instead of a catalyst being used to protest or try to drive stuff, we became a partner. And people would come to us and say, hey, Home Depot, we're thinking about doing this, or we want to move into this area, we're thinking about buying this product. Or NGOs would say, we're thinking about going after this retailer. Do you think they know what their supply chain is? So over the years, we've been able to use this platform to really build partnerships and relationships that I think have made some pretty big impacts in forestry around the world. So, but we took this mentality and said, that's the way you handle everything. Regardless of what the issue is, if it's coming in from a stakeholder and they're concerned about it, don't be aloof and say, well, it'll go away, ignore them. Do the due diligence. Do the due diligence on both sides of the positive and the cons, and know them both. So when we sit down and talk to the stakeholders about it, we know both sides. So we took this mindset and created a category called eco options. And the reason we did this is we would have people come to us and say, I always hear companies and industries and suppliers talk about how green their products are. And we want to know if it's really true. We said, well, there's certifications out there. Yeah, there's 350 certifications. So whatever you want to get certified, you can probably get it certified if you're willing to do the due diligence and pay the money. So we said, okay, we're not going to accept any certification. We're going to narrow it down to just a few that we vetted. So we did, and we sent a note out to, at the time we had 8,000 suppliers, and we sent a note out to 8,000 suppliers and said, tell us everything that you have that you consider to be good for the environment. What do you have that's in the built environment that if people use, they will have the better choice? So at that time we had, I don't know, maybe 300,000 SKUs in our entire system. This was 2007. And of that, 76,000 came back from the suppliers as being green products and good, built, environmental friendly products. And we said, wow, that's a lot of products. We're in much better shape than we thought we were. Well, when we took our filter and put it on top of it and said, no, to make eco options, you have to be at this level, which is a pretty high bar. Just because you have recycled content does not make your product environmentally friendly. To be eco options recycled content, you had to be 100% post-consumer recycled. So all of a sudden we had some very strict boundaries around what our products should be to be considered environmentally friendly. So with that, we created 5 pillars, and those 5 pillars were sustainable forestry, clean air, water conservation, healthy home, energy efficiency. And that's the ones we started with. Last year in 2019, we added circular economy, because we do think that even though circular economy today is more talk than walk, we think that we can help the industry get to where we're manufacturing the right products. So as you look across the category, just a couple of quick notes on these categories and what we've been able to do. Look under clean air. At one point, all of our paints were regular VOCs, so probably 300 to 400 to 500 grams per liter VOC. We wanted to bring out a 0 or low VOC product, and we did, and it was called Fresh Air. It was $36 a gallon. The rest of our paint was $18 a gallon. So if you wanted to have low VOC, no VOC paint in your home, maybe you had asthma problems, you had young kids, you just didn't want to have the pollutants in your house, you had to double the cost of the paint. So instead of buying Bear and Glidden for $18, you'd buy Fresh Air for $36. And it's interesting because I was helping a customer one day, and she was talking about her young daughter, and I said, then this is what you need. If you're painting her bedroom, I would go no VOC paint. She was so excited to hear about it, but then she realized that she was going to have to pay twice as much for paint to get the low no VOC paint. She said, I can't do it. I can't afford it. So what Home Depot did is we said, you know what? We're going to take all of our interior paint to low and no VOC. So we went back to the suppliers and we said, we need to develop a program to go low and no VOC paint, and we're going to do it at $18 a gallon. Well, the good news, 2 years later, when you go into a Home Depot store, Fresh Air was gone and the $36 was gone, but Bear and Glidden at $18, which was still, voted in a lot of reports as the #1 paint in America, was $18 a gallon. So we learned that certifications are good, but sometimes you have to take the customer to where they want to go. And we're looking at that today with our chemical program. And we said with our chemical program, a lot of the stuff that we have, that we've reduced the chemicals, paint, carpet, insulation, those are not eco options products, but they're better. So our conversation to the merchants was, stop buying green products, just stop. Now let's go green the products that we buy. So all of a sudden the products that are on the list today, these are not eco options products, but they are better than they were. And so what our charge is whether it's certified environmentally friendly or not, how do we as a retailer each year make sure those products are a little better than they were? So that's one of the things that we're pushing to make sure that we have the right categories in place. And as we back up and look at what we have for the operations, products, talked a lot about products. It's still 99% of most of everything that we do, because those are where the big impacts are. But as we look at our store operations, we know that carbon emissions, global warming, climate change, all those are pretty much table stakes for any organization that wants to say, we're conscious of what we're doing, we're responsible for our business. So in doing so, in 2009, we started tracking our scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. And we said, we're going to put things in place that reduce these. And the great news is we've been able to reduce scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 dramatically. All what you see on screen is some of the things that we're doing for our stores as far as getting renewable energy and alternative energy for the stores. We've been able to buy into a lot of fuel cells. I think we're probably up to 210, 212 stores now that have fuel cells. We have rooftop solar, we have off-site solar, we have off-site wind, a lot of things that we're doing, and we're anticipating to finish 2020 with over 20% of our energy use in the stores being from either renewable or alternative energy sources. So we're very, very pleased with what we've been able to do in that arena. And what's happened with that, when you look at the recognition that you get, as we've started tracking our emissions in 2009, each year we've been able to get better. And if you can picture this, in 2009, our sales were about $66 billion. We will finish this year somewhere probably south of 120 billion. So almost double the size of the company, almost double the revenue of the company. And we have reduced our carbon emissions by over 3 million metric tons. And that's not, it's all absolute. So we have a 3 million ton reduction in carbon emissions by doubling the size of the company. So we're very, very proud of what we've been able to do there, working through store operations, working through our supply chain. And in doing so, we get recognition from groups like the CDP. We have a score of an A and considered to be an industry leader for the things we do there. Just last year alone, in 2019, we reduced our carbon emissions by 333, our electricity use by 383 million kilowatts in our stores. And same thing with our distribution centers as well. We've been able to add square footage to our total portfolio and reduce the carbon emissions. So we're proving that it can be done right, that as a corporation, you have a couple of different scenarios that you need to address. And that's one is your footprint of what your company does. And the second is, what is your biggest impact, whether it's sales, whether it's product, whether it's manufacturing, and what's the impact down the road. So we look at, for us, it's the use of products sold. So we spend a lot of time looking at the use of products sold when someone does buy a product and they leave Home Depot. If it's a gas lawnmower, we estimate how long that gas lawnmower is going to be in production, how much gas it's going to use, and what the carbon emissions are. So we track that on an annual basis as well. And there's a couple of great things, like just for instance, on gas lawnmowers. Most people don't realize that Americans spill about 18 million gallons of gas every summer. So whether it's filling up their weed eater, their leaf blower, or their lawnmower, 18 million gallons of gas that we pour out onto the earth. So we work with companies like TTI to bring the Ryobi brand and others of electric products. And I have electric blower, electric chainsaw, and all those work great. So as a company, we're very pleased with what our vendors are now bringing to the table for us to work with. So as we look at the future for us, we know that we cannot let our foot off of the accelerator. That even times like this, we're right in the middle of COVID, that people are working from home, and some of the businesses that if you've been shut down or have been limited to the number of hours that you've been open, are having revenue problems and profit problems. And people are saying to us, does that mean that you look the other way, that you can take your foot off the accelerator and you're not going to be pushing responsibility and sustainability? The answer is no. We think that now is probably the best time to put the foot on the accelerator as we rebuild, as we look at opening up the businesses and opening things back up. Take the time to do it right. When we sit down with our suppliers, and we have thousands of supplier meetings a year, we talk to them about sustainability. And as soon as sustainability became a conversation in the boardroom and a competitive measurement, then all of our suppliers started coming in and saying, but let me tell you what we're doing in our industry to make our industry better. And that's, for us, that's been a breath of fresh air. So instead of having to pull the vendors into sustainability, now they're coming in with programs and new ideas every day. And we look across the board and say, there's really only 5 categories of concern that we have with products. And the first one is carbon emissions, which carbon emissions, climate change, global warming all together. So carbon emissions. The second is chemical exposure. What type of exposure you're getting from chemicals that you're buying from Home Depot and using. The third is forestry, sustainable forestry. Are we destroying the world's forest? Are we making them to where they're sustainable? Are they growing or are they diminishing? And the fourth one is water use. We have to make sure that we take care of water. And the fifth one is waste and recycling. So you take everything together, all those thousands of touch points, it boils down to 5 categories. So as long as you're monitoring those 5 categories, then you can stay on top of your business and you can move the world, move the industry and your company in the right direction in sustainability and responsibility. And Anastasia, I think we're almost out of time.
Yep. And we got one question/comment, and I thought it was very relevant to some of the initiatives that you just kind of pointed out. So Eric Law says, great work on wood, but wants to know your thoughts about plastic packaging. So it's like, we used to be able to buy nails, electrical connector, plumbing connections, all of that in bins. Today, everything is individually packaged in plastics. Your stores use single-use shopping bags and shrink wrap. Single-use plastics are a big thing right now. And they just want to know, what are your thoughts on that and reducing the amount of single-use plastics you all use?
Well, it's a great question. We actually started, we amped up the program that we have with our suppliers where we check how much plastic is in our supply chain. And last year, we were able to reduce it by over 7 million pounds. And what that does is each year we send out a list to our suppliers and we say, tell us everything that you're packaging that's in plastic. And what are you doing? Is it, EPS? We've made an announcement for 2023 that for all of our private brands products, which are thousands of products, that we're going to be PVC and styrofoam EPS free. So we're well on that path within 3 years to be out of those products. And we know that once we get those industries, we've already done it in holiday and Halloween. So now when you go buy a nutcracker or glow balls to put on your tree or anything along those lines, it's not in styrofoam. So we've already started the process, and it's our goal is to eliminate those from inside of our supply chain.